Grim new numbers on the weekend violence. In St. Louis, Missouri, 11 people were shot. 2 of them are dead. In New York City, 27 people shot, 1 fatally. That also comes as the New York State Attorney General is proposing police officers' use of force and taking a look at peeling that back. And in Chicago, 47 people shot, 9 of them fatalities. And that just days after Chicago's Fraternal Order of Police issued a vote of no confidence in Mayor Lori Lightfoot, citing poor work conditions, burnout, and low morale, among other issues. However, that Democrat mayor is brushing off the criticism.
Getting a vote of no confidence from that guy is a badge of honor, accepted. So as I said, there's always going to be critics. That goes with the territory.
That's more than brushing off. Does that entice a very difficult road ahead, knowing that that's how the mayor feels? Joe?
It's unbelievable that Lori Lightfoot would say it was a badge of honor to be criticized by a police union. Here in her city alone, there were 1,200 people shot this year so far, more than. Compare that to 886 last year. That is a tremendous increase, about 25%. And they already had horrific numbers. And Lori Lightfoot's talking about how she'll only give interviews to journalists of brown and black color. Not to Hispanics, of course, Asians or whites, but this is the thing she's concentrating on when she has a catastrophe going on in her city. And 18 of 20 cities overall, Harris, with the highest murder rates, are run by Democratic mayors. That is a fact, and that's a fact you don't hear very often on television in news reports because of the philosophy, honestly, of taking away police funds or reallocating or however you want to spin it. But that's the bottom line of what's going on in these cities. And look, I filled in for Guy Benson recently on his radio show, and I spoke to a police officer in Arizona. He made a very poignant point. He says, look, I'm retiring. I'm only in my mid-40s, but I'm up for my pension. I'm tired of being depicted in the media as a racist, as somebody who's working against the community. And he says, now, here's the result. He goes, me and all of my other friends and all across the country where you're seeing these high retirement rates, they can't backfill the positions. They're having trouble with recruitment. And he says, what's going to happen as a consequence is they're going to lower the standards in terms of who could be a police officer. And then you're going to see a drop in the quality of law enforcement and then more situations where perhaps misunderstandings or bad things happen, Harris.
Or they will cut the budgets to where they don't fill those positions at all, or fill them very differently, as you say. I mean, I don't know which would be worse, but neither one of them serves the people. I don't think that's what voters in any of those municipalities is expecting. Can we pop this up? Because I want to show this again. We showed it last hour. I didn't think it was on the screen long enough. 20 U.S. cities that have cut police budgets, because this is worth taking a look at. Because you want to know whether or not defund has some examples of maybe where it hasn't worked. Minneapolis, #1 on that list. Tomi Lahren.
Yeah, well, this is what Democrats do when they don't want to actually solve a problem. They find a scapegoat. And in this case, they have chosen the police, and they've also chosen to talk about race ad nauseum, as if that is the biggest problem facing our nation when we have much bigger problems. But what's going on in our cities right now, it's not just one simple thing. It's not just the defund the police movement. There are so many variables at play here. But it's also a culture of lawlessness. It's not only been through this defund the police BLM movement, but also through a lot of different policies that have been going on, not just the last year, but the last several years. In New York City, we've got our cashless bail, you've got prison reform, you've got all kinds of reform when it comes to not only your police departments, but how they look at crime, how they reclassify felonies as misdemeanors to get more people back out on the streets. And that's looked to as prison reform. But what it's actually created is a culture of lawlessness and a culture of people not really understanding the consequences of their actions, because there have been fewer consequences for these actions. But other things that you have in play, keep in mind, the American people have been living for a year and a half in this new normal, this COVID world. Now everything is starting to reopen again. People are getting checks in the mail. This only helps to increase the problems in a lot of these cities. But you've got mayors, Chicago, and you've got a lot of other Democrat leaders, again, that don't want to focus on a problem that might not just be part of the police and the defund the police movement, but also it goes back to community issues, community problems. Why are these police officers having to play parent? Where are the families of these individuals? Who is fostering the upbringing of a lot of these kids, and a lot of these kids that are growing up in bad ways, joining gangs and living in a culture of violence? There's a lot of things that need to be discussed here, but simply just looking at the defund the police movement or the BLM movement, that's not looking at the totality of the problem, and we all have to do better at that.
So, Kayleigh, the former president was, and I have talked with him more than once about law and order, was very focused, laser focused on this issue of keeping America's cities safe. And of course, we're just a day shy of the murder of George Floyd a year ago, May 25th. So that will be tomorrow that we will have come a year. And this country has seen a lot, as Tommy and Joe have pointed out. Why do these mayors like Tashira Jones in St. Louis, where they have the highest rate of murder in the country right now, why do they think that they can be different by defunding and moving resources away from the very people who work to keep us safe?
Because they know they'll never be held accountable for their policies. Look, you're right, and I'm so glad you brought up President Trump saying law and order. Right as we were coming to air, I was reminding myself and looking back at some of the headlines that came out in the wake of President Trump driving home this message. It was called deceptive that he said law and order. He was even, they said it was racial undertones. That's how NPR described his call for law and order. No, why was he calling for law and order? Could it have had anything to do with the historic increase in homicides in Baton Rouge and all across the country? Chicago, we're seeing murder rates tick up. New York City, Louisville's on pace for a second year break its homicide record. That's why he was calling for law and order, as we saw buildings razed to the ground all across the country in violent riots. He supported our police. He called for law and order. And you contrast that. When's the last time you've heard Nancy Pelosi bring up rising homicide rates, or President Biden, or Vice President Harris? They don't bring it up. And when Police Week comes, they are deathly silent. There is no commendation of our officers. There's no national leadership to rally behind our police.
Kaylee, I want to pause there with you for just 1 second, because you bring up a good point that they don't bring it up, but why don't the reporters ask them about it? You've got Mayor Tashira Jones, who I just brought up in St. Louis, looking at things just cook at a very high heat, very bad for her city, yet they look at defund.
That's right. They don't bring it up. And in fact, the former head of the White House Correspondents Association wrote an article when I brought it up and said I was distracting by bringing up this issue. Distracting. No, I was putting light on a problem. When you have a little girl who loses her life amid violent protests, Sequoia Turner, not amid protests, but amid homicides rising in the country, we're going to bring attention to that story. It's not a distraction. It's a real life that is no longer with us.
Yeah, Sequoia outside that Wendy's where her mom was in a car. It was dark. It was late at night, and they were protesting near there. And look, she crossed over a line she didn't know that even existed with those protesters. And somebody fired into that car and killed that little girl. I remember that very well.
That's right.
Emily, I want to ask you a question that might seem a little odd legally, but I am curious about this. So if I'm living in a city and things are really going downhill, and it's getting more dangerous for me to utilize some of the services that my taxes are paying for, can I sue the city if they so mishandle the police as a citizen?
We saw that in Seattle with citizens saying that effectively the local elected leadership had abdicated their duty to protect and serve their citizens. Absolutely. However, the question is really whether the suit itself will be successful. I think a lot of it had to do with the messaging, that these citizens are sick and tired of these city leaders and elected officials acting against their best interests. When you scrolled that 20 cities list of those who had defunded the police, among them was Berkeley, California, next to Oakland, California, where I'm from. And it struck me because, Berkeley also canceled their Coffee with a Cop Thursdays that they used to have at this sort of big famous coffee shop right by the Cal campus. So in addition to the defunding that's going on or mischaracterized as reallocations, there's also a kneecapping of all of the programs that were set to foster community engagement with our police department. We covered the New Orleans cancellation of the Blue program at the zoo. How else do you foster community relationships and developments? I think the question, too, is when is enough enough? How many months, how many years do we have to sit by and report on the horrors of these spiking trends with no one doing anything about it? It's like a thin layer of ice on a really deep pool. Joe Concha mentioned that Arizona police officer who talked about the generational ramifications that we will see, the ripple effect that we can look forward to with these police departments as they retire, as they die by suicide, and are absorbed by other communities where they say, quote, that they are wanted. As well, just this weekend, a federal prosecutor in New York, for example, was shot in the eye. She got a bullet fragment at her while she was sitting at an outdoor restaurant in Brooklyn. How many of these stories do we have to go through? And keep in mind, just a reminder, Mayor de Blasio says,
how many of them can we tell?
Clear case of the result of the coronavirus, as well as people cooped up, he said. And he said the pause of the criminal justice system. It's not a pausing of the criminal justice. It is an absolute erosion.
Yeah, I mean, you don't hear enough coverage of all those things. And every time I think about it, Tommy, you say this, Kaylee, you say their names of the police officers who were trying to do their jobs, just as we say of people that were looking into whether or not justice was served in a shooting between a cop and a perpetrator. I mean, we have to treat all of it as if it were important, because it is. And I don't know if you caught, while Emily was talking, we popped up on the screen, Portland, Oregon. A shoot up in homicides, and forgive the pun there, I don't mean it like that. I mean, it really is shooting up literally 800% in homicides. Like that is unbelievable. Yet some of these mayors think it's a good idea to take cash away from the cops. Or call it something else, as the Kansas City mayor told me on Friday. We'll call it reallocation. Whatever. Let's see if it works differently in certain cities.